This fresh coat of the startup life has been sprayed on nice and smooth by Wagner and the Flexo series of paint sprayers. Startup Nation, my wife decided she wanted to rehab her childhood home. The goal was to fix it up and invite a nice family to rent it out. We knew one of the biggest jobs we had to undertake was painting. However, from the walls, the cabinets, and even the siding outside, it was going to be a big task. As entrepreneurs with a company to run, we knew this was going to take up a lot of our time, which is why we decided to get a paint sprayer. And after much research, we decided to go with the sprayer from the Flexio series from Wagner. Startup Nation, these sprayers are top-notch because of its flexibility to paint or stain walls, furniture, cabinets, and more. It's 10 times faster than using a paintbrush, which was a big selling point for us. And you can paint or stain right from the can. It's also easy to clean in 5 minutes, and being great for indoor and outdoor projects, a paint sprayer from the Flexio series clearly needs to be part of the arsenal in your garage. So if you're ready to stain your deck, or like me, fill your daughter's request of a bubblegum pink room, up your game with a paint sprayer from the Flexio series by Wagner. Take it from me, your time will thank you.
It's time to be about that life, the startup life. Here's your host, Dominic Lawson.
All right, Startup Nation, so I hope you're ready to receive some value today. My name is Dominic Lawson, and this is The Startup Life, the show for entrepreneurs and career-minded professionals. You know, Startup Nation, we hear this phrase or term, risk management, all the time. But what does that mean? What does that mean for you? What does that mean for your business? What does that mean for you personally? And so we have a perfect guest to kind of help us sort that out, even amidst all this COVID stuff that's going on as well, to kind of help us sort it out as well. My man is Van Carlson, and he is the founder and CEO of Strategic Risk Alternatives. VC, what's going on, boss?
Hey, not much. I appreciate the opportunity to get our message out, and looking forward to our time together.
No worries. And Startup Nation, you know, we're going to talk a lot about his business and what Van does. But if you want to go ahead and check that out, we have strategicriskalternatives.com. That link is there in the show notes for easy access if you're listening to the replay on the podcast. So VC, man, if you don't mind, man, just kind of share your origin story and your background if you don't mind.
Yeah. So, I started in the property casualty world where, I was a licensed insurance agent and started my practice in '96 from scratch. My headquartered, my office, my business is in Idaho, in Boise, Idaho.
Okay.
Little town right outside of Boise known as Meridian, which I believe there's a Meridian, Mississippi too now.
There is.
Anyway, so yeah, things were going pretty good. Business was good. Our area was growing pretty rapidly, and I enjoyed what I was doing. I became, as any entrepreneur, business owner starts out, you wear all the hats, and as time goes on, you start to give those hats away and hire the right people and develop your business model and build everything out. And, being a pretty successful insurance agency, I was working with, at that point, I kind of picked and choose what I wanted to do. And I really gravitated more towards business owners,
right,
and helping them manage their risk more effectively and really dive into some of the stuff that we were covering and not covering on a lot of these insurance policies. And then '08 came along, and unfortunately, I saw clients become friends, certainly mentors and everything else. And
right,
unfortunately, I saw a lot of those guys, get caught in a business cycle that was beyond their control. And, they're good business owners, but not a lot of times, risk, nothing's ever going to happen, right? We all live. I mean, if we're going to own a business, you're going to have to be optimistic every day, and you're going to have short-term memory.
Right.
And, or, it's going to be hard to get out of bed sometimes, but
absolutely.
This has been one of those years. I hate to say, but
right.
So '08 came along, and I thought, man, this is crazy. There's got to be a better way to manage risk more effectively. And not only the we call it a fortuitous risk, where that's what traditional insurances cover, stuff that unforeseen incidences, not planned occurrences, and so forth. Mm-hmm. But one of the things I saw was the financial risk business owners take on, and it gets discounted all the time. It gets discounted by the public, and it gets discounted really by the owner of the business.
Gotcha.
They don't they're personal guaranteeing everything at the end of the day.
Right.
Most of their loans and everything they're doing, and the economy takes a turn. Something unforeseen like COVID-19
Right.
comes up. That you've got you really knocks you home pretty quickly. How much risk you took to go do what you do, and that's really where I kind of spun off. I was able to put my agency in a way. My wife was working. We were a team at the agency, and she took over that agency for a while, and then we ended up selling the property casualty agency in 2014. But 2008, I really jumped into strategic risk alternatives, and that's really when I saw self-insuring risk issues that most business owners take on that they don't realize they are self-insuring risk for, and how do you manage that risk more effectively is really where I, in the last 13 years have dedicated my profession, my business, I've been able to grow that business substantially over the years.
Right.
I've got a great team of professionals working for me, and now I think we got about 180 agents around the country representing our products, our concepts, our ideas, and the COVID-19, unfortunately, is kind of not. A lot of clients that we have, they're thankful they've been with our program for a while, and they're able to take advantage of some of the things that we put in place for them. That traditional insurances just certainly not going to respond to.
Right.
And they're not in a big hurry to increase more risk of policies. If your policy's gotten bigger, it's only because the exclusions have gotten more often in them.
Gotcha.
They have to put exclusions in the policy.
Of course.
That's why the policies now, they love sending out electronic files of your policies now because it saves them a ton of money in paper. But I can remember when I first started the business and how much smaller these policies were. And every year they just kept growing thicker and thicker. Mold was coming on really hot and heavy. Mold was covered at one point and then became excluded. And then from there, it just became a domino effect of exclusions. Saw it really heavily in traditional homeowners insurance policies.
Right.
And then from there, it just gravitated towards business owners, office buildings to apartment complexes to, the amount of exclusions that have come out. And now, the SAR, unfortunately, the SAR, back in 2009.
Right.
When the SARS was hit, Chubb Insurance lost a lawsuit. They were challenged in court about this business interruption coverage because some businesses were being affected by, obviously the country didn't shut down like we did with COVID, but SARS was definitely affecting some businesses, tourism being obviously the biggest one, right? And Chubb ended up losing a lawsuit because they said it wasn't covered under their business interruption endorsement on their insurance policies, but then the courts just ruled in favor of the insured, and all of a sudden now they're covering these pandemic issues.
Right.
And after that, all the traditional insurance carriers started putting language in all their insurance policies excluding business interruption for pandemic coverage.
Mm-hmm.
And then here comes COVID-19 along this year. Now, there's been a lot of court cases already, and judges are just throwing them out of court. A lot of insureds are challenging their insurance carriers for not covering their business interruption. I mean, dental practices were pretty much forced to shut down. Medical, any elective surgeries, all these guys that were in the medical community, and in all these other businesses that were affected by that too. I mean, there were, severe business interruption going on, and in some places in the country still. I mean, restaurants. I mean, all those things.
Right.
And so, unfortunately, they're going to find no coverage, and I think the language is pretty clear in the insurance policies today. They may not have been as clear back in 2009, but the insurance industry certainly has cleaned that language up. And I think they're going to find out that, most of these clients, none of these clients are going to have coverage for business interruption. And that's really what we try to focus on, Dominic, is the ability to really manage the cash flow of the business. Because, we talk about the intangible versus the tangible assets of a business. We think traditional insurance companies do a really good job with the tangible assets of the business. Unfortunately, most business owners, not unfortunately, it is, we all work for the intangible assets of the business.
Of course.
The greatest intangible asset of any business is cash flow.
Right.
So we design risk mitigation strategies to make sure the cash flow stays intact. And yeah, that's really what we do. I mean, and we do it in a way that we take advantage of some tax language out there, some tax codes. It's no different than the 401k. It's called an 831B. We compare the two a lot between the two. The 401k is a deferred income from the business for the incentive to create a retirement plan for their employees and for themselves as well. The 831B plan is a deferred taxable income into a plan that really manages the self-insuring risk of the business. And I don't want to make it any more complicated than that. It can certainly start to sound complicated.
Gotcha. It's all good.
But
go ahead. I'm sorry. I didn't want to cut you off.
You're good.
Gotcha.
That's really it. I mean, that's what we do, and we definitely make it to where it's affordable. We believe no different than 401k. It's going to become a normal business practice, own some kind of form of your own. We call an 831B plan, because self-insuring. The reason why the code even exists is self-insuring risk is not a deduction. So as a business owner, I go out and write an insurance policy. I get an insurance policy for work comp,
right?
General liability. I got my office equipment covered. I got my business. I got my inventory covered. I got all that stuff covered under, a traditional insurance policy. And whatever that premium is, I get to deduct out of the 162 line item deduction and as necessary and ordinary expenses. And so I'm able to deduct that. No different than deducting my power bill to my building for my employees to work inside the building, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I get to deduct that as an expense of the business, and I get to take that against the profits of the business and so forth.
Gotcha.
Pretty normal business practice.
Mm-hmm.
Under a 401k arrangement, whatever I contribute to my employees' retirement plan is also deductible at the business level as well. And but with self-insuring risk, some of that is warranty risk. A lot of it is warranty risk. We call it the non-merchantability warranty. I mean, the return policies of business owners, the return, when I tell clients that, Costco, okay, so Costco's, anytime you deal with a retailer, they have typically pretty liberal return policies,
right?
And of the products.
Mm-hmm.
And unfortunately, it's not it's Costco that's eating that. It's the manufacturer or the distributor that put it on the Costco shelf.
Right.
And so they got to honor that stuff. I mean, the product is perfectly fine. It's just the customer didn't like it.
Mm-hmm.
So there is it wasn't a defective product. So we have some strategies there for that. I mean, I could tell you that we deal with a lot of Amazon startups.
Gotcha.
Where, they're getting the product out there, and Amazon's going to demand certain things from them. And one of them is a return policy. And unfortunately, the return policies are pretty liberal. And if you don't start building up a liability for that, I can already tell you that I've already seen businesses get vaped because of it, because
mm-hmm.
they never took that into consideration. They might have a great product, great procurement center to be able to procure the products and get it out to but if you don't start building reserves up in the back room for these returns, especially after holidays, I mean, if you're a big person that sells a lot of your products during the holidays, returns are going to come back.
Gotcha.
And so what we do is we have some strategies there as well to offset some of that. So there's just a lot of things that go into risk management, and it is obviously surrounded by financial risk and everything else. But we see that, honoring other people's words can be very expensive. So we deal with a lot of general contractor, anybody that's relying on, we call it a subcontractor default, where if the subcontractor you hired to perform that job for you
mm-hmm.
goes out of business or leaves town or whatever, and now you're still being held responsible for that work.
Right.
Where's that going to come from? I mean, that's going to come right. You better hope you have enough profits still sitting around to offset, because you're going to have now deal with that expense. So there's just a lot of strategies that, we talk with different industries all over the country.
Right.
And to be quite honest with you, a lot of our clients are more matured out businesses.
Gotcha.
That have been on the books for a while. They run good profit margins, and they've kind of gone through the hard knocks, and they want to manage that risk a little bit more effectively. I think anybody that's starting a business today or doing a startup I think you have to seriously look at the other side of things. I mean, like I said earlier, you got to have short-term memory, and you always got to be optimistic for the day ahead, right?
Of course.
But unfortunately, we got to work on the back end of the room where, me being in the insurance industry for over 20, 25 years now, I've seen it all. I've seen a lot unexpected things happen to business owners, and I think, part of the risk management job is to make sure you sit down with business owners and you explain to some of the risk management on the other end. And how do you mitigate that risk is by utilizing some of these things that are only available to really big companies. Big companies have been doing what I just described to you about risk management, about building reserves up, about taking advantage of a tax code and all those things.
Right.
Fortune 500 companies have been doing this for literally decades.
Right.
The tax code I referenced, 831B, was made law in 1986. We're coming up on what, 40 over
yeah.
40. Oh, yeah, we're
almost 40 years. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And unfortunately, a lot of business owners don't even know exist.
Right.
And they know all about the 401k, but there's only 2 tax deductions that are available to business owners for deferring taxable income, and that is the 401k and 831B. And again, I can only reiterate to everybody, they may be hearing about this for the first time, and no different than they may not be able to offer a 401k yet because of where they're at in the growth pattern of their business or whatever. But these are all things that people want to put in place long term for their business, for the successful of their business, for retaining employees and everything else. And we believe the 831B will become just as predominant in the mindset of business owners that realize that they are self-insuring a lot of risk that they cannot transfer to a traditional insurance carrier. And
Gotcha.
and again, I think COVID-19 really drove that home for a lot of business owners this year, unfortunately. And I'm sure they never saw it coming. I mean, I don't think anybody could have predicted January, especially not this time last year, but you hear little rumblings of what's going on. But
right.
Certainly by January of this year, you couldn't have predicted what we forecasted by end of February, beginning of March, what was going on.
Right.
And so again, those unexpected events that you might have a great product, might have good market share, might have good reputation in the community. You're killing on Amazon. You got great content out there. I mean, all the things you're doing right, and then all of a sudden, something way beyond your control comes into play. You can't prepare for everything, but I think if there's things out there that you can do to minimize it, then I think you owe it to yourself and your business, and for that matter, your employees, to make sure your business does stay in place as long as it can. Now, the government obviously came out and did the PPP thing, and I hope a lot of business owners took advantage of it.
Right.
Talking with a lot of business owners out there, a lot of them, if they didn't have banking relationships,
mm-hmm.
they didn't even know they could qualify for
it.
That's why a lot of it wasn't used, by the way.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I think it was $300 billion wasn't even used on the PPP. But it's going to be interesting with CPAs this year and the tax returns that we've dealt with business owners on, and talking with them what 2020 is going to look like for them. Some of them have done. I always say it to every. There's winners and losers in every tragedy, unfortunately, or economic downturn, or whatever you want to call this, when it comes to a business cycle. And there are going to be some winners come out of this. I mean, we're seeing sanitation companies right now, their revenues are up substantially.
Right.
Go figure. Right. They couldn't have forecasted that this year. Right. How would they have even known to, and then the procurement of products, anyway, so, all of a sudden now everybody's making hand sanitizer. I've noticed.
That's true. You're making either hand sanitizer or a mask.
Oh, yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
I mean, businesses grew up overnight on that, right? I mean, literally. All of a sudden, distilleries that were making alcoholic, vodka, whatever. Now, all of a sudden, they flip to a hand sanitizer company.
Right. Yeah, we actually had a clother who doing designs for clothes and stuff like that, and they just switched their entire business plan to just making masks for the most part.
No, I think they're starting to transition out of it a little bit now, but that's still like a big part of what they're doing. So yeah, I definitely understand what you're talking about that maturation process for sure.
Yeah, and then that's, again, their revenues are up substantially. So, like, again, but what's crazy though is, we don't know what's going to happen with that down the road. I think if I had to forecast risk, looking at risk management, risk just, mitigation, and again, I can, we're consulting a lot with business owners all over the country, especially as we have other agents bring in clients. And, the nice thing about being in our business that I'm in, I'm always amazed to how people make money, what businesses they're doing and how they're doing it. And you're like, you're doing what? And you're like, selling what? And it just blows my mind. I love it. That's the biggest thing I love about our business is this running into people that took an idea and ran with it. And now they're very successful at it.
Right.
And, so we learn a lot, but, each one of those types of businesses have a unique risk profile. And some things that, unfortunately I can kind of dive through that pretty quickly now based on my experience of, hey, yeah, well, you got a gap here. This is what the insurance industry is going to say. I think what's going to happen in the future, though, and in the very near future is dispute resolutions lawsuits are going to ramp up. And I think directors and officers insurance coverages are pretty much going to be very, very difficult. They already were tough to get. Now it's going to be worse. Because if I was an investor and I was an investor in this apartment complex or this commercial development, and I had a directors and officers that were overseeing it, and they didn't set aside reserves or build up or buy an insurance policy to cover pandemics, but now we lost a bunch of rental income that affects my life, and you can turn around and sue the directors and officers for that. I think there's going to be a substantial amount of lawsuits coming out over that. And I think there's going to be a lot of lawsuits, supply chain interruptions that occurred. Unfortunately, the courts are already backed up. I think we're going to see a lot more lawsuits coming. And that's, don't be surprised if a hand sanitizer wasn't made the way it was supposed to.
Right.
It gets tested. It wasn't that strong. And this person got COVID-19. How are they going to disprove, hey, I used your hand sanitizer, it didn't keep me clean? You could just imagine that. Could you just imagine all that stuff, right? I mean, that's a ton, so those, again, that's a risk management profile. And again, I would just tell any business owner, unfortunately, if you're in business long enough, there's a high probability you're going to be sued for something.
Right.
It's just it's the way the world is in our country. It's just, we're pretty litigious.
Yeah.
And again, your insurance policies, a lot of times, now there's a right to defend on your insurance policies. They may not pay out the damages, but there are a lot of things in there that will cover you for your legal defense. Unfortunately, there's a lot that will not cover you for your legal defense. One of the things that's going to come up too is we call it employer liability practices, where employees were laid off or employees weren't brought back. And now discrimination suits go up. Why wasn't I brought back? You reopened and you didn't offer my job back. I mean, there's just a ton of things I can see in the future. And then too, if you contracted COVID-19, they still haven't put a liability, for a lot of business owners that are having consumers coming into their stores or whatever, Congress still hasn't put a liability exclusion on out there for the business owners yet, which has been kind of surprising. Not that they haven't done that yet, because, you're opening, if you're a restaurant door and you've opened now after, some of these states are, taking off the pressure off of closing.
Right.
But somebody still gets sick and get COVID-19, and let's say, God forbid, they pass away, and and they're saying they contracted it in your restaurant. You as a business owner, can you be sued because of that? That hasn't really been defined yet. By Congress is kicking that around. They were going to have a liability. Basically, business owners weren't going to be held liable if you contracted COVID-19. And that includes also the employee. The employee can technically claim it under work comp. We're going to see work comp rates go up significantly with this as well, because COVID-19.
I can see that. Yeah, I can definitely see that. I'll go ahead. I'm sorry.
No, you're good. No, it's just going to be really interesting to see some of these things play out long term.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it's going to be, we call it the hardening of the market right now with property and casualty insurance. Business owners are going to see substantial rate increases go into place in the foreseeable future. And then too, if they get mandated, if all of a sudden they're mandated by Congress or by the states, really not Congress, but really states are the ones regulating the insurance industry. If they get mandated to cover COVID pandemic type illnesses or pandemics coverages where, the insurance industry is required to cover that as a business interruption coverage now, you're going to see insurance rates go up substantially. One of the things happened after 9/11, there was Congress came out with a Terrorism Act. Basically, it because it was kind of interesting. And if you're in insurance and you can get kind of geeked out like I do sometimes, but when 9/11 happened, they were calling it an act of war. Well, the problem with that is it specifically excludes acts of war in insurance policies. I mean, every insurance policy out there from property casualty will exclude nuclear war and acts of war. So all of a sudden now they call it a terrorist act.
Right.
It wasn't an act of war; it was a terrorism act, which you can make the argument either way, I suppose. But it ended up being called the Terrorism Act, and at that point became very gray as to whether or not the insurance industry had to cover the claims or not. Obviously, it was in their interest in the public relations issue to cover the towers that fell, the lives that were lost, and of course the substantial amount of business interruption that occurred in the New York City area due to that 9/11 event. But after that, Congress came out and passed the Terrorism Act, which basically said, "Hey, we'll be a backstop for the insurance industry if our country is hit by another terrorist attack again. We just want the insurance industry to cover it, but they can basically, it's kind of like FEMA, where it's flood insurance, where basically the federal government is really the one doing the insurance. It's just the administration is traditional insurance companies offering flood insurance, but the person that's really paying the flood insurance damages is really the U.S. taxpayer. Now they're collecting some premiums for that, but just be rest assured, there's never going to be enough premium collected to really take care of floods when they occur because they're such catastrophic events. That's why there's earthquake zones now set up in California, for example. The Houston area has a wind district set up where traditional insurance carriers don't want to cover wind because it's too catastrophic in the event of a hurricane in the Houston area, given how big and how wide Houston is. The amount of damages in that area would be significant. And everybody's kind of, being in Mississippi, you guys all, the Katrina events, and I think just recently, maybe some hurricanes that have come through there recently.
Yeah, in the southern part of the state, Zeta, or Z, I think it's called, Zeta. Yeah, there's been some issues there in the southern part of the state. So, yeah, I definitely know what you're talking about.
Yeah, so the government's going to be the one to backstop this thing, and what will be interesting to see is because really, and the only reason why they can is because they get to print their own money, right? I mean, let's be. I'm not going down the road of political at all. I'm just stating the facts.
No, of course.
The way the government gets to back all that up is, insurance companies can't print their own money, so they can't make money doing it, so therefore they won't do it.
All right, Startup Nation, so we're going to go ahead and take a quick break. We got to pay some bills. Once again, my name is Dominic Lawson, and you're listening to The Startup Life. Tresta powers this episode of The Startup Life. Okay, Startup Nation, I want to talk to you about our sponsor, Tresta. Tresta is an app for iPhone and Android that lets you do business calling and texting from anywhere. I know so many entrepreneurs that are still using their personal phone number for business calls. It can get complicated drawing the line between your personal and professional life. Startup Nation, this is the best business phone app out there. Whether you just need a business phone number or if your team is ready for a complete business phone system, Tresta is totally flexible and can grow with your business. And it's all unlimited calling, texting, and all of the powerful call management features like auto attendance, call recording, user groups, and more for just $15 per user per month. With Tresta, there's no contract, and you don't need any special hardware, just your smartphone you're already using. Tresta is easy to configure, so you can set everything up yourself, all online. avoiding all the hassle and high overhead costs of setting up a traditional business phone system, which is important because as entrepreneurs, we are always trying to cut cost and time. They're offering a 30-day free trial so you can see if Tresta's virtual phone system is right for you. Communicate smarter and more efficiently with Tresta. Start now at Tresta.com/startup life. That's TRESTA.com/startup life. The link is there in the show notes if you're listening on the podcast. Tresta, business communication simplified. All right, Startup Nation, welcome back as we continue our conversation with today's guest here on The Startup Life.
And that's, so you need a federal government to step in. What will be interesting to see is on this whole thing with the COVID and the pandemics and stuff is if they come out with something similar program like they did with the terrorist acts. Who knows? We'll wait and see. But I can just tell you, traditional insurance carriers aren't going to run in there and start covering it. They really can't collect enough premium to offset it. To give you an interesting statistic on that, in the business interruption, I think at a national level, in premiums collected, it's something like $45 billion a year in premiums. In the first month that the government, basically everybody was shut down, it was estimated that month there was $472 billion of business interruption occurring. Well, if the traditional insurance carriers, and by the way, this business interruption covers you for fire, wind damage,
right,
theft, if your business is affected by, where you can't conduct business anymore to traditional main perils, they call it, business interruption triggers those events. If my office building caught on fire and I couldn't perform my day-to-day business, my insurance carrier would cover they didn't even cover my employees' payroll under business interruption. But the interesting thing about the COVID thing, everybody was shut down, but they didn't have a named peril triggering event, right? They didn't have a fire. The government just said, you got to shut down.
Mm-hmm.
And they did. But there was no triggering event. And so there was no business interruption coverage on their policies. And that gets back to what I was talking about earlier. But what's going to be interesting to see, though, is if the government steps in and says, okay, we're going to have to come up with some of their own programs.
And that's, I'm sorry, and that's important because, like you said, it sounds like in the risk management game, like definitions and terms matter a lot. You know what I mean? And so it's like if
words
something, sorry, say that again.
Words mean things.
Absolutely. Sure. Words mean things, right? And so it's like if something doesn't fit, in that linear category, you can definitely find yourself in a world of hurt. And I guess that goes back to what you mean by, having your cash flow situation kind of squared away and stuff. Is that fair to say?
Absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
And here's what I tell clients all the time. So we're able to put a vehicle together under the 831B tax code, allows you to take deductions. We put it into, we're their administrator. We administrate the plan and we make sure the deductions allowed under the 162 line item deduction.
Mm-hmm.
And to get there, there's a lot of, there's a lot of knowledge that has to be obtained by the business owner. And we have videos, and we have all that kind of stuff at our website, strategicriskalternatives.com. But
right. Also really quick, also Startup Nation on the YouTube channel as well. We have that link there in the show notes for easy access. Go ahead, Van. I didn't mean to cut you off.
No, you're good. So we're able to build these vehicles up and during all the good years, right? I tell clients if you're having a good year, just to take a little bit off the top and park it off to the side, it's just risk mitigation 101. That's what I was getting back to earlier. I kind of jumping around here in thought processes, but I talked about the maturity of our business owners are typically mature, meaning they've been in business for 10 plus years. Their profit margins are good. They have they're not really in a huge growth pattern. So there's, stabilization going on. And that's really when you can start to see profits increase and all that kind of good stuff. Right. And they've gotten through, I call it threading the needle, right? They've gotten to the point where, they took an idea and they got it all the way through the process and now they're a profitable business. And for us, just to be able to take a little bit off the top and park it to the side, what we find a lot of business owners, I think a lot of entrepreneurs get into this trapping. And I think there's a lot of people talking about this now, which I'm glad to hear it, but the lifestyle. making more money, get the bigger house, get the bigger cars, go on bigger vacation. I mean, just start spending the money. And one of the things that we deal with all the time is we have a lot of clients that like to spend money, and who doesn't, right? But at the same time, though, I think knowledge is power and everything else. It's just when we talk to clients about these ideas, it is a forced savings plan. It is the ability to put this money away and build for the rainy day fund, build for the unexpected. And it takes a certain maturity to do that, because, we live, keeping up with the Joneses are important to us, right? I mean, It is. I mean, I've experienced it in my 30s, and I'm thankful I survived it. But, some people haven't. And that's really the challenge we have mostly with clients, is that you're going to have to back off the pedal of spending. And because now this is because let's be honest, there's never been an incentive to save money in our country.
Right.
The incentive is quite the opposite, is to spend it.
It's true.
Right.
It's true.
And so that's
no, go ahead. I'm sorry.
No, you're fine. I'm probably talking too much already, but the challenging part of that is getting that business owner, that client, and that's, again, speaks to where we're at with our traditional clients. Typically, is couples in their 50s,
right?
Mom and husband and wife, successful business. Kids don't want the business anymore, and now they're looking at, like, who are we going to sell our business to?
Gotcha.
One of the things I talk about when I go out to convention, when I was going out and speaking at conventions and so forth, doing CPAs, continuing ed courses, and all that kind of stuff. One thing that we keep hearing about is this transition of wealth that's going to be occurring with the baby boomers.
Right.
But what I'm not hearing is who's going to be taking over all the small businesses. Who's going to be inheriting them? And I got to tell you, I would tell you, 9 times out of 10, the kids. It used to be the kids would take the business over. That's just farming community. You see that a lot in business, but a lot of these small businesses, the kids have they don't want it. Mom and dad work pretty hard for that. I don't want that lifestyle. Or they just have other interests. I mean, they don't. That was mom and dad's dream. That's not my dream, right? I mean, so there's a lot of that going on. And I just don't, it's going to be very interesting to see, especially when you hear statistics about small business owners being predominantly the major employer in our country today. Who's going to be the small employer? Who's going to be the small business owner going forward? And the risks they take every day to do what they do. This COVID thing, I think it's going to, I hope it doesn't put a lot of people off to the lane starting their own businesses.
Mm-hmm.
But I can certainly see why they would want to take a step back. I tell clients, I look at a business and I don't try to be, a naysayer or be negative with them. But, sometimes business owners, they just got a glorified job with a ton of risk. And I always sit back and look at that and I think, man, would it have been just easier to go work for somebody or maybe get a government job? I don't know.
Right.
But I certainly scratch my head about it.
Gotcha. No, a lot of business owners, they definitely just kind of dive in and don't take that, part into account. So I'm glad you said that. And I want to ask you something. You was talking earlier, but I want to ask kind of like a 2-part question, if I may, because, I know a lot of people are, a lot of businesses are gearing up for the holiday season right now and stuff like that. And like I said, this pandemic has kind of come out of nowhere. How are you kind of advising your clients, to kind of maintain that cash flow during a pandemic, during the busiest selling season or buying season of the year? Kind of share some of that insight, if you don't mind, man.
It's the chicken and egg kind of conversation, unfortunately.
It's quite the degree of difficulty, wouldn't you say?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Because cash flow, if cash flow has been contracted and now you've set cash flow away to buy more product for the quarter, and you've eaten that up by paying rent, maybe having to keep some of your employees on board. You're hoping maybe for a second PPP program or whatever. it's going to be very difficult. And I think you're going to see inventories, we're hearing, inventory is going to be pretty light this year. I think it's going to be one of those things. If it becomes a hot button toy or a product of any kind, it's going to go fast. And so it's going to be an interesting year. I don't know what the retailers' expectations are this year. I think it's going to be one of those things. But the problem again is business owners. When you open up a business, it costs you X to open, but then you got to have X amount of dollars sitting around to operate the business before money starts coming in.
Right.
I mean, that's called cash flow and operating capital, any of that stuff. And it's so important to maintain that, because once it's in the system, how do you keep, it's literally the prime, it's the pump that primes everything, right? I mean, It gets everything going, gets the water going, and now you have flow coming in, and now you can kind of just maintain it, right? But the problem is when the water stops coming in, you still got to keep hitting that primer. You still got to keep hitting that pump to get the water going, right? So it's a difficult situation, and fortunately for us, a lot of our business owners have been clients with ours for a number of years now, and they have built up the reserves, the surpluses, that rainy day fund, and now they're able to access it. So, we've seen millions of dollars go back out. I would tell you that we were probably one of the first ones to get millions of dollars back out to business owners through our process and procedures to make them whole. That's even before the PPP thing was happening. Once the PPP thing started, we kind of saw a slowdown of that, because a lot of business owners, did get a lot of money sent to them for operations and their payroll and things they were concerned about. But, going forward right now, I think the bigger thing is it's not so much ramping up for the holidays. I think are they going to be able to get the product they need, and they're going to be able to get it to where it's affordable for them to still sell the product? Because, some people will say, oh, it's price gouging. Well, it's not price gouging. If you have less product to sell,
right,
and if you're a manufacturer and you can only bring X out, I mean, it's simple economics at that point. You know what I mean? It's going to be more expensive. I can already hear some rumblings out there about some products being more expensive this year. But it's like, well, I own 4 different businesses. One of them is a business venture I have with my brother in a plumbing business. And us trying to get vehicles right now, commercial grade vehicles, before the end of the year, so we can replenish some of our fleet. There's nothing to be had right now. And we like a certain vehicle. We like the Ford Transit vans, for example, and we can't find it. It's crazy right now. And I'm thinking to myself going, I mean, we're not that big of a plumbing outfit. I can't imagine what, and so it's just, it's going to be an interesting year. I think we have to, as consumers, have to be prepared for, maybe there'll be a lot of gift cards this year being bought. I don't know.
Sure.
That's probably the biggest thing I would tell clients to do if they can't get the product right now, is just make sure they get those gift cards out, because they'll purchase those gift cards for the future. And that will help them be able to get their cash flow up faster than anything right now is those gift cards. And I think
that's actually not a bad idea.
Oh no, I think consumers should go to the restaurants and buy, especially in December. I mean, some of these restaurants have been shut down. Go out and buy gift cards for these places, or get a gift card from some of these retailers that might have sold out these products that couldn't get the products in. Nobody's going to ping it right ever, right? I mean, the inventory control is very good in our country, but when you have this backlash of inventory and the backlash of demand, and now all of a sudden it's going to hit, the pendulum's never going to swing right. They're always going to oversupply something. I mean, it's just the way we work, right? Nobody has that big of a crystal ball, not yet anyway.
Right. No, like I said, I just think that's a good idea, because, and it kind of leads to my next question, because, gift cards to kind of be used for later. You get the cash flow in now for value later. And that's one of the things we've been kind of advising Startup Nation is to, provide those values, those bundles, those packages, because that's the name of the game right now, is provide, some type of, discounted value. Well, not necessarily discounted, but like some type of value to where it can be deferred to be used over time or later and stuff like that, which leads me to my next question. How does this look like, after the pandemic, because the pandemic's not going to last forever, right? So what does this look like, and how are you, advising your clients after that? Because 9/11 happened, there was an after 9/11. 2008 happened, there was an after 2008.
100%.
Exactly. This pandemic is here. There's going to be a time after this pandemic. So when it comes to cash flow and stuff like that, and that risk management, what are you kind of advising your clients to kind of prepare for those next steps, those next parts of their business ventures?
Yeah. So, getting the word out for what we do. I mean, I think it's been an interesting year for us personally. I mean, we didn't know where we're going to be at this time. When we first started having our strategy meetings for the year,
right.
Our growth, we want to, every business wants to grow, and how are we going to grow? What industry we're going to target after? What's the different marketing ideas we're going to have? What content we're going to put out to the public? I mean, all that stuff. Right.
Right.
And this COVID thing comes along, and you're like, man, I don't know. Are businesses going to be able to stay afloat? Are they going to, and what we found is a lot of businesses, a lot of businesses have thrived in this downturn. Like I said earlier, there's winners and losers, and we're finding those winners right now that took advantage of the situation.
Right.
Good, bad, or otherwise, this is the way the world works. But and then so they're looking at going, well, yeah, we don't know what next year's point. I mean, okay, well, we did great this year, but that doesn't mean next year we're going to, because your point, COVID-19, it can be vaccine comes in and everything's back to normal, and it could be. I mean, I hope it comes sooner than later, but what ultimately I think is going to happen is, I think a lot of business owners are going to have to reflect on this year and say, okay, how do I mitigate the risk more effectively? I can't buy my insurance way out of this. I can't transfer my risk to the insurance policy. I'll never buy an insurance policy that covers all my risk. How do I mitigate this better? And maybe I can't do it today. Maybe I can't build my rainy day fund up through utilizing the 831B tax code.
Mm-hmm.
But I certainly owe it to myself and my business partners and my employees and my customers and everybody else to know that down the road, this is a tool that's available to me, and I need to understand it more effectively and efficiently. And when the day comes, you need to be able to say, okay, this becomes now part of my business plan. This is how I'm going to mitigate some of my risk that's unforeseen, and this is how I'm going to do it. The tax code was passed by Congress, no different than the 401k,
right?
And it's available to business owners. Only business owners that have a 162 line item deduction in their tax returns, and which is typically a 1020 tax return. But the whole point of that is understanding it. It may not be the right timing, but know that these tools are available to you. So the next time this happens, you can rest a little bit easier at night, and you certainly don't need to rely on the government to bail you out on anything. And that's owning your own business. That's the freedom you have to own your own business.
Right.
And like I said, ultimately the responsibility to your business is to, you got to take risk. You got to take risk every day. And I tell clients, you got to take calculated risk. If you can calculate risk and the reward's greater than the risk, then of course you go do it. Right. I mean, that's just the way we assess everything we should do every day.
Of course.
But if I can mitigate that risk, and I can then put that into the calculation, then it even makes it much more attractive to go do. And that's really where I would just tell any risk taker out there, take the risk. You have to. But if you can minimize it just by a little bit, that can be the difference between living and dying.
Absolutely.
And that's what I would tell them, and that's really where we're putting some of our messaging out already. I mean, we got through this, and I would say, I said it back in 2008. I mean, the reason why you survived 2008 is because you contracted expenses. You did everything you had to stay alive. You got rid of the waste. You became a better business owner. That's what, when everybody's making money and everything, you can be pretty fat and lazy and still make money. It's when you have this contraction in place, especially in some certain industries, that, if you survive it, you can capitalize on it.
Right.
We call it coming up out of the trough. And if you come up out of the trough with money in your pocket, you're going to be in a great position to capture market share. You're going to be in a great position for a lot of things. But the old adage, cash is king, it becomes pretty evident in those times.
Gotcha.
And I think that's coming up. It'll be really interesting to see what happens with commercial real estate in general. Are some of these smaller shops, some of these strip malls and strip centers and everything else, are they going to be, they're going to lose eventually to where, and who's going to come in and what business is going to replace that? I don't know. I don't. It's going to be an interesting time.
For sure.
I think the next 18 months will certainly be interesting.
It's funny you mentioned that. We actually spoke with the former CEO of Prologis, Walt Rakovich, about that very thing. And he says that, a lot of what you're saying now, like a lot of the people who, kind of, mitigated those, those large risks and had those calculated risks, they're going to be just fine. You know what I mean? You're going to have a few blips here and there, but for the most part, they're going to be fine. So it's funny you mentioned that about commercial real estate.
Yeah, it will be. Yeah, and it's then that, of course, that world has changed so much too.
Absolutely,
Zoom, right?
Absolutely.
I mean, look at I think business traveling's been changed fundamentally, and I think the way consumers are willing to accept their ability to get the products. Do they really need to go down? I think it's going to come down to a service issue. I think if you're not offering some kind of service, it's going to, a unique service or just any kind of service. But if you're trying to sell a widget out of brick and mortar, man, I think that's going to be tough going forward. I really do. I just think the consumer is willing to accept a lot more than they did 8 months ago.
Right. It amazes me just how much has changed in a matter of 8 months, not a decade, not a year, but 8 months. But no, you're definitely, on to something there. Once again, Startup Nation, we're actually wrapping up with Van Carlson, founder and CEO of Strategic Risk Alternatives. And if you want to check out that website, there's tons of resources there. Go to strategicriskalternatives.com. We have a link there in the show notes for easy access if you're listening to the replay on the podcast. We also have a link there to their YouTube page with some great stuff as well. And also, if you're a longtime listener of the show, we are partners with the Risk Management Society, and you should also be happy to know that Strategic Risk Alternatives are professional members of that society. So that definitely something you want to be mindful of as you go forth, and you want to reach out to Van and his team about those risk management and strategic services that he offers. So Van, I'm actually going to turn the last question over to you, because what we like to do at this time usually is that, look, with everything going on, we just ask our guests to kind of share some words of encouragement. But if you could, sir, could you just provide some words of encouragement to help us out for today, if you don't mind?
Sure. Appreciate the opportunity.
Mm-hmm.
No, I think for the risk takers of our society, it will be. Maybe we'll make more of them because of this.
Right.
Maybe people say, hey, you know what? I was employed and I didn't like it. I want to run my own show, and I think there's a ton of opportunity out there for them. I think for business owners that are out there looking to make this transition of ownership, search those people out. I think there's plenty of people that want to take the risk, but they lack the knowledge or the know-how. They certainly don't lack the desire or the perseverance. And that's really, I think perseverance is probably the biggest thing you have to have when you jump into business. And you notice, when you see it. And I think business owners that are out there that are looking to make transitions, and do retirement or whatever,
right,
there's other opportunities out there for younger people to take over. And I think that's one of the things that I think the younger people need to look at the opportunities out there, not just working for a big tech company or going out and getting a job, but for me, it's is there business opportunities out there that I can either take over an existing business, or can I create something on my own? And I think there's going to be a ton of that opportunity going forward. Mm-hmm. And I certainly hope this past year hasn't, it certainly would have create any kind of pause to own your own business. But, in my area, it's been interesting to see some vacancies go in and new businesses come in. And that's been encouraging to see. And so I think there's going to be some opportunity ahead for a lot of people. They just got to be looking for it. And there's a lot of different ways to do business today. I think the trades today, business trades, I need trades. I'm talking about plumbing, electricians, and all that. I think if that's certainly an industry that any young person ought to be looking at today, because I think those are substantial amount of opportunities out there ahead for people to get into the trades and own their own businesses and take over a lot of businesses. These gentlemen, these men, women who've been running these mom and dads and mom and pops or whatever, been running these businesses for a long time now, looking to sell, but they got nobody to sell to.
Right.
You want to go out and own a business, man. There's no better business than owning an electrician or plumbing business, in my opinion.
I hear that.
But yeah, I think there's going to be a lot of opportunity coming forward, and you just got to look for it.
Definitely. Yeah. Is one of those, first of all, it's an essential business. So there's that. And there's also, it's one of those things that's definitely, kind of, we like to, kind of recession proof for the most part, if you will. So no, I definitely understand that. And like I said, man, like so much has changed in the past, 8 months. I hope we like to think that, we've prepared our audience, because honestly, before all this happened, we actually had a gentleman from the Federal Reserve, and reason we brought him in was to talk about a possible recession. So I'm so glad we brought him in to kind of talk about that stuff for sure. But I want to say thank you so much for coming on the show, Van. And that's going to,
if you want to let us know what you think about our show, have an idea for a show topic, or would like to advertise on our show, send us a message on the Startup Life Podcast Facebook page. And while you are there, like and follow our page as well. It's a great way for us to engage with you, Startup Nation, and really grow our community. The link is there in the show notes. Subscribe to the show, as it can be heard on Apple Podcasts, Google Play, Stitcher Radio, Spotify, or even on your Facebook timeline or any other platform you like to get your podcast. If you are listening on Apple Podcasts and you find our content valuable, please give us a 5-star rating, as it will help us climb the charts and help more people find our show. You can also listen to the show on the Startup Life Podcast new website. There you will find the all-new startup blog, where I write on many topics that are interesting and helpful to you on your path to entrepreneurship. And hey, if you have an idea, be about that life, the startup life.